What is going on with Khamzat Chimaev? In today's video, we are going to discuss what is going on with Khamzat Chimaev. Where has he been? Why hasn't he fought? Why have we not heard any news about when or where his next fight will be, or who it is even against in the UFC for the championship? Is it even for the middleweight championship anymore? Is he moving up to light heavyweight or down back to welterweight for a second championship opportunity? I will cover all of that in today's video. And if you like breaking UFC news and great UFC content, we post 2 to 3 videos every single week. And if you guys want to join an up-and-coming channel before we make it big time, now would be a great time to hit subscribe and be a day one community member. But with that said, let's get right into the video. And you guys already know Khamzat Chimaev back at UFC 319 in Chicago, Illinois, won the middleweight championship of the UFC. And in that fight, he beat one of the best fighters in the UFC at the time, one of the top-ranked pound-for-pound fighters in Dricus Du Plessis. And this fight wasn't particularly close. He dominated Dricus for all 5 rounds. He held him in the crucifix position. And a lot of people say it was a boring fight. I am more of a person who thinks it was impressive, if anything. I mean, Dricus has never been shown to be a scrub with his wrestling, and for him to get dominated 5 rounds in a row, this is a world champion with a great resume in the UFC who has multiple title defenses, is just insanely impressive for Khamzat to make him look like that much of an amateur in that fight. And then after that fight, we had 2 fights that were really going to determine who Khamzat Chimaev's next opponent was. And the first fight was Nassourdine Imavov versus Kyle Barajo, and the second fight was Reinier de Ridder versus Anthony Hernandez. There was a lot of hype on both fights. These were 2 top 5 matchups, and pretty much every UFC fan thought that whoever was the most impressive winner out of those 2 fights was going to get the next shot at Khamzat. However, Imavov versus Barajo was a lackluster fight, to say the least. It wasn't the most entertaining thing I watched. You know, I could have watched paint dry on the wall. It would have been just as entertaining. So then everyone's hyped for RDR. He's had a crazy year, all these wins in such a short amount of time since coming to the UFC. And Anthony Hernandez just destroyed Roman Dolidze and looked like a very impressive fighter himself. So this was going to be a huge fight. And people thought that the winner of this was going to be by knockout and that that person was going to get the next shot at Khamzat Chimaev and the middleweight championship. However, unfortunately, Anthony Hernandez had to pull out with an injury, so we had Brendan Allen step in to take Anthony Hernandez's spot and fight RDR. And not only did he fight RDR, he beat RDR and made him quit. And this kind of derailed all of Reinier de Ridder's hype train. I mean, we used to say this guy was a future champion, and nobody has uttered those words since that fight took place. I mean, RDR literally quit and threw in the white towel in that fight, and we never see that in the UFC. That's a boxing thing. But for that to happen in a UFC main event fight as a guy who's being hyped up as a potential future champion is just insane. I mean, that's a bigger fraud check than the Bo Nickel fraud check from earlier this year. And Bo Nickel's already proven all of his haters wrong as last weekend at UFC 322. So with Brendan Allen winning that fight, and he is not in the right spot to be the next contender for the championship, it goes to Nassourdine Imavov. And it wasn't the most impressive, entertaining fight, but he did get a good win against a good fighter in Kyle Barajo, so he was next to fight Khamzat Chimaev. However, that fight took place all the way back in September, as did Khamzat Chimaev's fight, and we still have no update on who Khamzat Chimaev's next opponent might be. It's been radio silence all around the UFC. There's been no rumors, no news, nothing about it, and today we're going to break this down at who it could be and why there's not been an announcement. And as always, if you hit subscribe and like the video, it really helps us out in the algorithm more than you could imagine, so all of that is very much appreciated. We're on the road to 1,300 subscribers. But going back to the video, Khamzat Chimaev was not injured either. That's another reason why fights get delayed. If someone's injured, they can't sign a fight yet, but to my knowledge, there's been no news of Khamzat injury. We're not going to talk that into existence here. And there's also been no news of a Nassourdine Imavov injury. So if both fighters are healthy, why has this fight not been booked? Why is it not even being talked about? I mean, we see this happening with other champions like Alexander Volkanovski. He fought all the way back in UFC 314 before Khamzat and still hasn't had his next fight yet. But that one did make more sense. That was a brutal fight against Diego Lopez, and he needed time to recover. He talked about coming back late 2025, early 2026, and with the rumors of February's numbered card being in Australia and this potentially being Volk's retirement fight, I'm sure he wants to fight there in front of his home crowd one last time. And there's also multiple contenders right now at the featherweight division for the championship, so it's not as easy as Khamzat versus Imavov. At featherweight, you have people like Lerone Murphy, Movsar Evloev, and now Diego Lopez again, all asking for a title shot, and even Yair Rodriguez is in that conversation. So that is a little more explainable why that's been a bigger delay than Khamzat's is, but with Khamzat, we know who's fighting, and there's been no reported injuries, so this fight absolutely should be taking place. And we did make a video on Volk's absence from the UFC, so you could go watch that video after this one if you like. And another video we made was about Ilia Topuria and his absence. Ilia hasn't fought since UFC 317 when he beat Charles Oliveira to win the lightweight championship of the UFC. However, his is a little more explainable. Now, he didn't suffer any injury, but the lightweight division is just absolutely ridiculous with the logjam at the top, and it's not easy saying who's going to be next. On the first hand, we're waiting for Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker, which is a fight that takes place this weekend, and many people, myself included, have been thinking that if Arman Tsarukyan wins that fight, he gets the next title shot in early 2026 against Ilia Topuria. Unless he loses or has a big injury, then they'll throw someone like Justin Gaethje or Paddy Pimblett in there, who are also two other contenders with a claim to a title shot. I don't think Justin Gaethje really does, but Paddy had a face-off with Ilia in the ring after 317. There's big beef there. That would be a banger fight to start off the Paramount era, so the UFC is definitely looking at that option. And then the last thing at that division is Islam Makhachev. If Islam Makhachev lost last weekend in UFC 322, which he didn't, people thought he would come back down to lightweight and fight Ilia for the title. And then people thought maybe if Islam Makhachev won, which he did do, that Ilia Topuria would move up to the welterweight division to fight him there. So now that these cards are falling in place, we're just kind of waiting for this Arman fight this weekend now. We will probably be seeing an Ilia Topuria announcement in the near future. Again, I made a video on that you guys can go check out after this one with more details. But so we've eliminated any other contender from this division that Khamzat is in, and any injury or anything that could be also delaying this fight with Khamzat Chimaev and Nassourdine Imavov. But there's still radio silence, and the only other theory I can think of is that Khamzat Chimaev might be trying to leave the weight class to go for a second belt in the UFC. Khamzat's talked multiple times about wanting to be a double champ in the UFC. And he's even saying he wants to be a triple champ by winning a belt at welterweight, middleweight, and light heavyweight. So he's called out Alex Pereira multiple times and wants to move up to fight him. But we know that Alex Pereira wants to move up to heavyweight to fight there. So we're waiting for Khamzat Chimaev to figure out if he's moving up to light heavyweight. Are we waiting for Alex Pereira to figure out if he's moving up from light heavyweight to heavyweight? Are we waiting for Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane 2 before Pereira moves up? Are we waiting for John Jones to come back? Are we waiting for the White House? There's so many questions here when that comes into play. If Khamzat moves up and Pereira's not there, who does Khamzat fight? Carlos Ulberg? Yuri Prohaska? Magomed Ankalaev? If Pereira's there, he obviously fights Pereira. And will Khamzat move back down to welterweight for another super fight with Islam Makhachev? There is potential news around that, and if you guys are interested in that, definitely hit subscribe because I will have a video coming out this weekend or next week about that topic. It is going to be a great video. But those are the only theories I could think of, and who knows how likely they are to happen. Nonetheless, we all expected there to be at least Khamzat Chimaev news about when or where this fight would be, and we aren't getting anything, and there should be nothing holding this back from coming to fruition. But I want to know what you guys think. Down below, comment who you think Khamzat will be fighting next and when, and why has this hold off been happening? Where is the Khamzat Chimaev news? But with that being said, thank you for watching to the end of this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Deuces.